Well, the Democrats, they find themselves all on the wrong side of another 80-20 issue here with the United States of America. And one that should be very obvious, and this is on the war on crime to make our places safe. Whether it be our cities and our states, the Democrats have turned their back on all of us. And over the weekend, we had a story come out that it is truly horrifying that this happened in the United States, where some lunatic attacked this woman and the mainstream media completely ignored it, all because the skin colors were on the wrong side. And so when that happens, of course, they just pretend it didn't happen. And the Democrats and their friends in corporate media would be MSNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, New York Times, LA Times, Politico, Axios. They have all been so used to be able to just run the stories they want to run and then ignore the other ones that they do not want to run and control the narrative through those means. However, thanks to the rise of independent creators, thanks to now that we have the internet, that they have lost all their influence for very good reasons. And now they're desperate to try to take this narrative back and not having you look at what they don't want you looking at is the Democrats' soft on crime policies. So magically today comes out after this story that broke earlier in this week that we're going to cover is that all of a sudden they had this Epstein letter from Donald J. Trump that was supposedly a letter to Epstein for his birthday. And in this letter, they show this weird little doodle and then these comments. And this started with the Washington Journal, where they posted out and they said, they had this letter. And then Donald Trump, the Wall Street Journal, where they had Donald J. Trump, they said that he had wrote this letter to Epstein. Donald Trump, of course, immediately denied it, and then he went on to sue the Wall Street Journal. We will wait to see what happens with that. And then the Wall Street Journal of America, they even said that they didn't have the letter. This was just reported to them. And then nothing happens. And then as the mainstream media, as we move on, and they're trying to push Epstein, they've been very furious and upset as they just can't seem to get that to grasp with you, the American people. Is you just no longer are buying into whatever the mainstream media is trying to push. And that is driving them absolutely nuts. Because thanks to here, like on the CASHLOREN show, we will go and we will expose the truth Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we make liberals cry tears that are saltier than you-know-who's fries. If you're enjoying this content, please take a moment, hit the like, and make sure you repost and help us spread an American First message with your followers and your friends and family. As this starts out here with the Epstein, so this was the alleged that Trump wrote this for his 50th birthday, and then Trump, of course, declined that he ever wrote it. Now, magically, the House Democrat, the Oversight Committee, they published this letter today. Now, no vetting, of course. There's no way to authenticate this thing. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But I find it very suspicious because of the timing. I mean, we had Joe Biden and his entire administration went after Donald Trump for years. Yet they did not go after him for Epstein. But when they had Merrick Garland and they had Chris Wray, you got to ask then, why not? I mean, why now? When the mainstream media, they kept trying to push Epstein, and people weren't falling into that. I think this happened right before Russiagate came out. We started to expose everything that happened with Russia. And then also the mainstream media, see, they're trying to turn your sense over to the Epstein files, right? Where's the Epstein list? Now, I don't know what did and did not happen with Epstein, but the idea that Trump is somehow involved with all this is very unlikely, to say the least, right? To say in a G-rated way, because we covered, if they had him, why was that not leaked through the deep state over to the mainstream media? And then why did people like Chris Wray, who hated Donald Trump, and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden, who all hated Donald Trump, who went after him for January 6th, who went after him for documents, who went after him for the boxes, and who went after him for everything else that could come up, all the impeachments, right? The Jean Carroll and the 34 felonies in New York. If they had Epstein sitting in their back pocket this whole time, then why did they not go after him for that? In what world does this make any sense? Of course, it doesn't. Now, when that didn't work and they couldn't get people to focus on Epstein, because this is the way that the mainstream media has always worked. is they pick and choose which stories they want you to talk about, and they ignore the other ones. And they've gotten away with it for an entire generation. It really wasn't until Elon Musk purchased X that we're finally able to expose them for the liars that they are. See, they'd either lie by one of two ways. Either they lie like what they did with these stories, where they completely and utterly ignore them and hope that they would just go away. Or the other way they lie, the most time the way that they lie, is that what they'll do is they'll tell you bits and pieces of what they want you to know, and then they will ignore the rest of the parts they don't want you to know and not give you the context that if you had the entire story, you would never ever come to the conclusion that the mainstream media wants you to come to. So this comes on to Epstein when they don't want you looking at crime. And Donald Trump is actually getting more popular as he goes into Washington, D.C., and now into Chicago and with L.A. and all the other parts where he is going to make law and order great again. And the Democrats, they cannot allow this to happen, because the moment that you realize that all these crimes in New York is not, or Chicago or California, is not something you just have to live with because they're big city problems. You have to live with them because the Democrats refuse to put criminals in prison. And if they were in prison, like the one we're going to cover today, then they would not be able to do these crimes anymore. Especially like the one that we had today, where it broke earlier, where they had this poor Ukraine woman who was a refugee who escaped the war in Kyiv. And she was here in the United States of America. And then some lunatic ended her on public transport. He unalived her, as I guess we have to say on TikTok to not get it shut down. So that all happened. The mainstream media, they did not want to cover any of this, of course. So they completely and utterly ignored it. And when it got exposed by thanks to the new independent creators who started posting the show, and I think it was End Wokeness, who at the time I did this had over 45 million views. And I checked just before the show went live, and it now had over 60 million views. We had a comment on X. CF says, we all know they're lying. And I agree, as we're going to cover through all this here on today. So this is a career criminal. I think his name, DeCarlos Brown Jr., should have been in prison. But he was released, I think, at least 12, let's see, where is that in my notes? 12 or 14 times by the Democrats. And not only was he was released on no cash bail with a promise that he would come back to court. But now a woman is unalived because of this lunatic. And the reason I think the mainstream media does not want to cover this is because it doesn't fit their narrative on what they want to demonize all the white people and make victims out of all the black people. So this was a black man who murdered a white woman. And all of a sudden, all the people who have all their Ukraine flags right in their portfolio, in Slava Ukraine, all of a sudden are very, very quiet right now. I wonder why that is. When it doesn't hit their identity politics, all of a sudden they have nothing to say. And so this the AP, PBS, New York Times, NPR, Wall Street Journal, BBS, CNN, WAPO were all covering none. And they're hoping that this story would just disappear. Proof like they've done for decades, where they ignore the stories they don't want to talk about. But they got something like George Floyd, or they have Penny, or they have any of the others all of a sudden they want to talk about. Well, then there's thousands and thousands and thousands of articles written. And all of a sudden they make this really big, huge deal out of a narrative that is not based in reality. But they can no longer do that, and they are raging on that because of these reasons. This is truly tragic. She was very young. She's in her early 20s, and she actually escaped the war in Ukraine. And you think that come here, and when she was able to survive the war in Ukraine, she was not able to survive the Democrats' soft on crime cities. Awful. And then even worse is how they choose to cover this. The fake virtual signaling from the left now is trying to make this all about race, because they're forced to finally cover it after it got so big on social media. I mean, it took tens of millions of views from a single post for them to even acknowledge it. Now, imagine if these roles were different. Okay, imagine if some black woman was sitting on public transport, minding her own business on her cell phone. And then some white male just came up and unalived her. Because from what I understand, again, that's what we have to say on social media, not to get taken down. is unalived, I guess. So it's just what it is to try to get this message out. If that had happened, if it had been reverse roles, then how many news articles do you think New York Times would write? Do you think it would be zero? Or what about CNN? How many articles, how many news coverages would they become? How about New York Times or Washington Post or Politico or Axios or any of the other ones who pretend that they are journalists, but really they are activists for the Democrat Party? See, if that with the cases were rolled, that's why the Democrats, they are through and through, they are racist. And their partners over in the mainstream media who are not journalists, who are activists for the Democrat Party, don't want to talk about this because it does not fit their narrative of trying to blame all the evil white people for the problems in the United States while they ignore what anyone else who is not white does in violent crime. And the statistics we're going to show you here in a moment are truly and absolutely shocking. But before we get into those statistics, I'm going to play this clip for you here. This is over on Brian Stelter, as he has gone on CNN, and he is going to blame everything except the criminal who committed these crimes. Take a look how he tries to frame this in the normal corporate media way on CNN. Here is Brian Potato Stelter.
Used, as you said, Brianna, as a political symbol, with MAGA media calling for more forceful punishments and more incarceration. I have to say, some of the replies to Musk, some of the comments around this story are baldly racist.
There you go. Right? So they can't help themselves. All of a sudden it's racist. Why? Because you're noticing these statistics. It's always the Democrats who want to make things about race. We just want to stop crime. Okay, I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your background is. What I care about, if a criminal commits a crime, then they should go into prison. And if someone is violent, then they should be removed from society before it gets to this point. Because the Democrats refuse to do that, and that has caused this. And it's the Democrats, again, who have made this about race. Because they've decided that if you're not white, then the United States is not fair for you. So they then, instead of going from equality, meaning like justice is blind and treated everybody equally, they instead try to make it about race-based. See, this is the Democrats. And so because, the people who are not white, and it's not fair for them, then therefore they have to do this fake virtue signaling for these criminals and keep releasing them from prison over and over and over again to commit more crimes. Exactly what happened here. I missed that in my notes. I don't know if it was arrested 12 or 14 times. I lost that in my notes here. I'll find that later, but it was more than a dozen at least. And if he had been locked up where he should have been, a violent criminal with a long history, does this sound familiar? And then the Democrats, their fake virtue signaling, released him again, over and over and over again. And now this woman has lost her life. She is now unalived, which she shouldn't be. But of course, the mainstream media, the CNN, the Brian Stelters, who have made this all about race because they keep letting these criminals out based on race, are now saying it's racist for you to notice that corporate media is racist.
Stoking fear of African Americans because this man attacked a white woman. The open racism on sites like X today, it's eye-popping. But
facts are not racist. Facts are facts. And we're going to cover some of these statistics and what the mainstream media and the Brian Stelter doesn't want you to know in a moment when we finish this clip.
But there are also legitimate questions about this so-called career criminal, someone who had been a repeat offender. And those questions, I hope they're not lost amid all of the cesspool kind of comments on social media.
Yeah, he hopes they're not lost because the CNN is not willing to cover them. I mean, it took over 10 of the millions of views for them to even start and to try to acknowledge it. And when they go to acknowledge it, it's still that, right? They try to make it about race. So that is the way that they decided to go with this. And here is more from the mainstream media. So this is Axios after they got forced to cover this. And notice what this headline leaves out. Gruesome video of a fatal knife attack on a light car rail in Charlotte is drawing attention from MAGA influencers seeking to elevate the issues on violence and urban crime. Yes, because the Democrats refused to lock them up. And if they had done it, if that judge had put him in prison where he would belong, then she would still be alive today. So yes, we do want to bring light to that because locking up criminals is good for society. And then accuses the mainstream media of undercovering shocking cases because they do. Because they absolutely do. Just like we pointed out, if the victim was black and the criminal was white, Is that the headline from Axios? Of course it isn't. Everybody listening knows that. The next Axios, when they had to forcibly, Grizzly Charlotte stabbing video fuels MAGA crime message. Gee, I wonder what they left out of there. How about that? He was a career criminal, that he'd been out a bunch of times. Or that the races, of course, when the races don't fit their narrative, they get ignored. But they continue to go on. Here's another article. Murder of Ukraine refugee in U.S. ignites war over race. So I think that's a typo. I think that's supposed to be war over race. I have no idea what war is. ROW. I think that somehow they're trying to post that as quick as they can. They couldn't spell WAR. I don't know. If that is a word, let me know. But Elon Musk and other right-wing figures complain that there has been little coverage of killing a white woman when black man is accused. Again, we're just pointing out the facts that is true. That is 100% happening. Next article. Trump on New York stabbing. So this is Trump saying these are evil people. They're right. Okay, there is a such thing of irredeemable criminals. And when you get a hold of these people and you lock them up and you put them in prison, especially when someone gets violent. Now, I do believe in a certain level of someone being forgiven, especially early on in a criminal's career. They usually start off very light, doing small things. And then as their criminal life escalates, they then go on to bigger and bigger crimes. Right? As this one shows, and I believe, I can't remember the sheriff said, but he went back and he did statistics. I think he said that the average murderer was arrested 17 times before they committed the ultimate violent act. And most of them, of course, had violent records. He starts with assaults and then moves up. So if early on, if you can rehabilitate someone, I think there is a chance to rehabilitate your life. Okay, I was one of those. Many of you may not know about my past, but I was homeless at 14. I was in and out of juvies and jails and institutions until I almost turned 18, and then I turned my life around. And there are many others who have that kind of story. But I was also nonviolent. And there's another point of this too. When someone becomes violent, there has to be a point where they get removed from society. And if you do that early on, one might say like 3 strikes, right? They had 3 strikes, this guy would not be out. And if he had been held instead of being released on his own recognizances, this also would not have happened. So there are 2 things I think there is. One, yes, we need to lock these criminals up. We do that, she is with us. As Trump continues to point out here, see, this was slide 6, and this is a quite long, but he goes on going to see, this is horrific to this beautiful young woman who came to escape the vicious war in Ukraine and then was riding Metro. Okay, so here it is. So he was given cashless bail in January, and he had been arrested at least 14 times. Why the heck was he even on this train? Why was he not in prison? This is an answer that we need. And then he goes on, he talks about how they need to change senator. But this is a huge problem for the Democrats. And this is why they're also trying to push this Epstein nonsense. Now, something happened with Epstein. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But this whole idea that Trump was at the center of this, and this is all about Trump, it doesn't make any sense. Instead, what does, I think, is very suspicious, what does make a lot of sense, is now the Democrats are trying to push all this way towards the Epstein, is they're trying to take your eyes off what's happening with these crimes in these Democrat cities. See, that's the real thing that they're absolutely terrified. Do not doubt me for a single second. The Democrats are scared to death that you will realize that you do not have to live with crime. You do not have to live with all this poverty and all this violence. You don't have to just become accustomed to it. If you lock up the criminals, especially the violent ones, and you remove them from society, then we can be safe again. That's why they're pushing so hard against, like in Washington, D.C., when Trump's arresting criminals, and then they're complaining as he's making the city beautiful again, cleaning up the trash and making the parks beautiful. That's what they don't want you to know. They want you to be so used to violent crime. You just say, this is part of life, but it doesn't have to be. And once they realize that, see, that's why they're fighting like so hard in Chicago. When the Democrats on the wrong side of this is probably at least a 95 to 5% issue with crime now. Because the minute you realize you lock up criminals, you put them away, all of a sudden the Democrats have completely lost the narrative. They're fake virtue signaling for letting these criminals out over and over and over again under the guise of equity versus equality and this fake compassion, right? Compassion for the criminals, not compassion for the American citizens who suffer. You don't hear them crying any fake liberal tears for them. No, it's always the criminals, and just like here, they're trying to make the criminal like he's some kind of victim and ignoring the woman who was unalive because of it. And speaking of fighting crime, we had a huge win today with SCOTUS. You had two really big wins. One directly we're talking about crime and one on another one. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more, but I just looked at the clock. We're way over. We're going to come back on this after this greedy profit break. You're not going to miss it. This is the CASHLOREN Show. Well, the statistics do not lie about what is happening in this country. As the Democrats continue to be pro-criminal and yet have no fake virtue signaling for the American citizens who suffer because they refuse to lock up criminals. And not only do they refuse to lock up these criminals, but then they try to lie about the statistics so that you will not know just how bad it is. Because you spend a lot of time on the first segment talking about how this poor woman was unalived because they refused to lock up this career-long criminal. But then their friends over in the corporate media also wanted to try to help the Democrats not bring attention to this because they refused to cover it. We had, for example, where Daniel Perry came out and he defended people on public transportation, but it's a very similar thing. And there's people probably alive today because of what he did. But the Democrats, they went after the law-abiding citizen and not the criminal. Wonder why they're on the wrong side of every single issue. Same thing with George Floyd. Right? Article after article after article, you all know who he is. How many of you even know what actually happened that day? Almost none. See, because they try to lie to you, the American people, constantly. And this is truly tragic. As we have for this next one here, this is what they won't tell you. These are the statistics of what is happening in our country. And on this side here too they're saying that the violent crime against interracial crime incidences. So this is saying that this is a white on black crime, according to this data, is 117,900. See, that's the part that Democrats want to try to tell you. But what they do not tell you is that the white side is about 60% of the population. So it's a very low percentage of population, but they don't want to tell you is on this other side. And so black on white crime is more than double. It is actually more than triple. 385,400 violent crimes from black members to white members of society. And this is with them being roughly about 15% of the population. There's about 4 times as many white people than women. It's about 4 to 1. Yet the black population does 4 times the amount of violent crime. This is what we're dealing with here. And it continues to get worse when the mainstream media and the others continue to refuse to cover this. When they want to make it about race, but they hide the details. As it goes on, it says here is that the white and black crime numbers devoid of all context exactly because they won't cover them. And then the data, it continues to get worse. Let's see, that is not the right one. I think, give me just a second. Let me get, okay, there's the right statistic. All right, so we go on to the next part here. Why I think all this happens is this something that the left doesn't want to talk about. When they pretend that they care about equality, but it's really equity. When they fake virtue signal for criminals, but they completely ignore what's happening to American citizens. When the real answer, the one that the left never wants to talk about, is fatherless homes. This is the one thing that happens in our society, and it's the one link that links crime, poverty, more than anything else. When the father is not in the home, but we have a big separation, unfortunately, between Gen Z, as these statistics came out from NBC. But before we get into those statistics here, so this is one where it says 1 out of 22 black men will commit murder in their lifetime. 1 out of 22. Black men are 6% of the population, but they commit over 52% of the murders. 70% of black children are born without fathers. 70% of juvenile delinquents come from fatherless homes. See, it's fatherlessness that's destroying these neighborhoods. The Democrats can't save you. The Democrats are the ones who created these problems. When they go in and they destroyed the civil rights movement with Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, and they addicted women to these so-called social programs that were supposed to improve their lives. But it did none of these things. It actually did a great amount of harm. Because the attachment to these was that they had to kick the father out to get all the free money, right? To get the housing, to get the food stamps, to be permanently poor. And we know when a single mother's home is a very high percentage chance of poverty crime. It's by far the single one. And the single highest percentage chance to go and have a great, successful life free of crime, free of poverty, and live successful is to come for a nuclear family based on our Lord Savior Jesus Christ. That's what the Democrats do not want to tell you. That is 100% what they're trying to hide from you, the American people. This is why they don't want Donald Trump going into these big cities and arresting criminals, because then you will find out how much they're lying. But for Gen Z, this gets even worse. As we now have a separation, we have a polling here. So this was done. So this was asked for questions. And this was on Gen Z people. And they were asked the top 2 issues, and they went all the way down to 12. Okay, so this is men who voted for Trump. 34% of them said the number 1 issue was having children. The second issue was financial independence. Now let's switch over to women, where Democrats have been lying about crime, or also been lying about what will make women happy. This is the women who voted for Kamala. First and foremost, a fulfilling job career. So ignoring this, this Nazi feminism has lied to women for an entire generation. And now that these Nazi feminists, now we're seeing the fruits of their labor and what's happening to these women, because by the time they realize it, it's too late. They're constantly told and lied to, family is so bad and family is evil and having kids, it's just awful. That's the end of your life. You shouldn't do that. No, instead, you should go get a job, right? You should just go get in the corporate world and climb that ladder and make as much money as you can. That will make you happy. And you know what? Don't worry about children. We'll just give you unlimited abortion. You can just end as many as you want. Probably the most satanic thing someone can do in their life is unaliving an innocent life. Well, this is how the left has lied to women over and over and over again. The second thing they said was having money to do the things you want. So a whole lot of selfishness and denying the very real biological point that there's something beautiful when you have a man and you have a woman come together and they have graduated school, they then have jobs, either 1 or 2, enough to provide for their family, get married, have children, raise those children in a 2-parent household, teach them to do well in school, teach them to get jobs, teach them to get married, and then have children also. That is the nuclear family. And once that is done, that is the highest percentage chance to have success in this country. Easily. See, the most successful people in America are not white. They're Asian. And Asians, more than any others, believe in the nuclear family by far. And this is what the left doesn't want you to know. This is why they continue to try to lie to you about everything that is happening in this country. We then go back over to the New York Times, as they had posted here, just in the Fox Weekend calls it like it is. And they're talking about, again, how the Daniel Perry, and then how they refused to cover what happened on the Ukraine. And again, back to the crime data. The part that the mainstream media always wants to talk about, because they only want to vilify white men, is they want to talk about how there are 117,000 deaths in white on black. But they never want to talk about how the blacks on white is 385,000. And they're only 6% of the population. And they never want to talk about how 97% of black men die from other black men. No, they want to talk about the less than 1% who die in a police shooting. And even then, they don't want to cover the details of it. This is truly horrific. It is just awful. And then you have the other Democrats, they continue to lie to their base, to all the American people. And one of them that's maybe getting away with it is Zoran Mamdani. I mean, there's a very good chance that he is going to be the New York mayor. And this communist, Here we gotta call him what he is. I mean, he might call himself a democratic socialist, but socialism is just another word for communism. All the left's isms, whether it be liberalism or progressivism, socialism, right? All those isms are just repackaged from Marxism to lead you into communism, to make you completely dependent on their federal government so the left can rule over you. And Zoran Mondani is one of them. He is a devout communist. And if they foolish enough to elect him, they're going to find out. Listen to what he's telling you about who he is. As he did another interview here, and this is Zoran Mondani. This is his own words. And he said here that he is going to create the Department of Community Safety. There's some more career useless people who can't do anything. And to do this, he's going to need $1 billion. Well, where's that $1 billion coming from? Well, new taxes. Surprise, surprise, right? That's always been the Democrats' playbook when they pretend that, oh yeah, we're for the workers. But they are not. They make your life more expensive. And they lie to you about how we're only going to tax the rich, because that's what he's lying about here. But you know what's going to happen? The rich are going to leave. That money's got to come from somewhere. And the ones that don't leave, right, because these are the business owners, right, they're going to have to raise their prices. And they're going to have less people working for them to cover this cost. Leads to more poverty, more crime, and more problems for New York. You think they learn, but they haven't. He then also goes on, this is Zoran Mondani, when he is asked, do you support abolishing the New York police gang database? Zoran Mondani immediately, of course. Oh my gosh. So he wants to make it even harder to identify criminals and leave them out on the streets to do what happened in North Carolina or Chicago or California, to commit more crimes, make it harder to find them, arrest them, and deport, and to put them behind bars where they belong. And this gets even worse. Zoran Mondani says that he will reduce the jail population. So all the problems that are happening now to you, the American people, when they continue to release all these violent criminals back on the streets, Zoran Mondani wants to do it more. He wants more violent criminals out on the streets to terrorize law-abiding citizens. He wants public transportation to be more dangerous. This is how society collapses. And then to top it all off, Zoran Mondani, to tell you that he is a communist when he lies about saying that he is a democratic socialist, yeah, that's just repackaged communism. And here's his own statement. People often ask what socialist means when we say we want to decommodify housing. Basically, we want to move away from situations where most people across the house access housing by purchasing on the market. So he wants to get rid of the free market housing and replace it with what? Towards situations where the state guarantees high quality housing to all. Just like his commercial said, what does he want to do? He wants to take away private land ownership and the government own the land. And the government redistribute that land to whoever they think they should have the land to themselves. See, that is communism. Zoran Mondani is a straight up communist. And I hit way over on another break again. We come back. I brought up earlier about the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about those stories when we come back. We're going to do that and a whole lot more. You're not going to miss it. After this greedy profit break, this is the CASHLOREN Show. Well, the Democrats took another huge L from SCOTUS again, as they've been trying to use their weaponized judges to slow down the Donald Trump's administration, but really you, the American people. 77 million of you voted for Donald Trump. He won all 7 swing states. I mean, Kamala Harris spent $2 billion to lose in one of the worst ways possible. Just absolutely got demolished. But the liberal elite, the Democrats, they can't accept that they lost. So instead, they're trying to impose their will against you, the American people, what you voted for. We're saying enough is enough. It's welcome back to the CASHLOREN Show. I appreciate every single one of you being here and sharing your evening tonight. We will cover all the stories that are happening in today's politics through exceptionalism. If you're enjoying this, take a moment, hit the repost button, like, and help us spread an American First message with your audience. The Supreme Court handed Donald Trump 2 huge wins, and he has already had, I think, 21. I read it, 21 wins, including the 2 today from SCOTUS. As the Democrats, they have been using their activist judges to try to usurp the will of the American people through these unelected judges. And what they will do is they will try to file these lawsuits where they think they'll get some friendly judge, and then have that judge write some kind of injunction, and they know they will lose. But it's amazing how the left, how they never ever seem to miss on a judge. You notice that? They don't have the same problems that the right has. We get a judge, and then all of a sudden they're making these strange rulings. The left always seem to get it every single time. And these judges couldn't care less about our laws or less about the Article 2 powers that the President of the United States has, as he's the only person in the federal government who was elected by all of you. The entire United States votes for this one man. Everywhere else, senators, House members, is all done either by state or region. President Donald Trump is the only one. And he was very plain and clear about what he was going to run on our economy, and he's going to run on fixing crime. He's going to secure our border, deport illegal aliens, everything that he said he was going to do. You voted for, and now Donald Trump is one of those rare presidents who is actually doing all the things that he said he was going to do. And the Democrats, the ones who lost, are now trying to stop the will of the American people through these unelected judges. Even the ones where SCOTUS has already ruled that they don't have nationwide injunction power, they're still ignoring SCOTUS. The real threat to our democracy. I mean, how many of you voted for one of these judges? 0. But how many of you voted for Donald Trump? Obviously, most of the nation. So the Supreme Court, they handed Trump a huge win. So this was a 6-3 SCOTUS decision. So right down party lines, the 6 conservatives and the liberal judges voted against it. And this was going all the way back to LA, when Donald Trump sent in the National Guard and the Marines to stop these violent criminals from burning down the city. Enough was enough. Now that he did that, you had Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass trying to stop him, but they weren't able to. So then they tried to activate their judges, and they tried to create all these activists to go up against the federal government, just like Chicago is doing right now. But of course, they got low-level wins because they had these activists, judges, and then they lost. I think the funniest one was Gavin Newsom, where he had a low-level judge give him back the National Guard, I think it was. And then less than an hour later, he lost that judgment. And the same thing is happening here. But their low-level ruling was so dumb, just unbelievably stupid. Because essentially what they're trying to say is Donald Trump couldn't racially profile when going after illegal aliens. But he already wasn't. If you're an illegal alien, you will get arrested and you will get deported. Now, the Democrats let in tens of millions of illegal aliens, a lot from Africa and a lot from South America. Thus, by the nature, bringing in a certain skin color into this country. And then through Haitians and others, and move them all throughout this country, especially into the swing states. So that not racially profiling to go after the people who are committing the crimes. But this empty low-level judge, it was ridiculous for 2 huge things. For one, it was completely empty. Because one, how do you prove it? If there's a criminal and you arrest a criminal, then how do you prove that it was racial profiling? But 2, Donald Trump has exclusive Article 2 authority over the federal government. No judge has a right to rule on it. That is exclusive to Donald Trump. But these judges, they ignored it and they did not care. And they were hoping to slow down, and they lost. And the Trump administration, to make this very clear, just in case I haven't yet, Donald Trump does not need permission from mayors or governors to enforce federal law. He can do it with or without their help. Now, they can choose not to help, which I don't understand. Why would they not want criminals arrested and put in jail? Why would they not want illegal aliens deported from this country they're not supposed to be in the first place? When the Democrats pretend that they care so much about workers and they pretend that they care so much about American citizens' rights, then why are they pro-criminal and why are they pro-illegal alien? But I think we all know the answer to that one. Then we have the mainstream media. So this is the New York Times posting about the Supreme Court ruling. And they posted this. Breaking news, the Supreme Court lifted restrictions on ICE agents in Los Angeles. Okay, they were always able to do their job, allowing them to make indiscriminate stops based on factors like ethnicity. Again, the Democrats, every time they lose on an issue, they always try to make it about racism. When it's the Democrats who are being racist, it's just unbelievably, no wonder why they're so unpopular. I mean, 19% is way too high for the Democrats. And then we have political breaking. Supreme Court lifts restrictions on roving immigration raids in Los Angeles because Donald Trump, again, always had that right. And there's no such thing as an illegal alien who's law-abiding citizen. If your first act to enter this country was to enter illegally, you are by definition a criminal. Your very first act was to break our laws. Now, the Trump administration is doing what they promised to do. They will find you, they will arrest you, and they will deport you. And the smartest thing that they can do right now is self-deport so they have a chance to come back. Because the other side of this coin, too, is all the people who come here legally, who went through the entire process to assimilate into our way of life and to become part of the West. It's a complete insult to all those people that you can just walk into this country and essentially steal tax benefits that never should have been there for you in the first place. It would be a great way to cut off all these illegal aliens and then reduce taxes. And then you had Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Brandon, because the one thing that the left is trying to lie about is on that this is somehow racist of Donald Trump to arrest criminals. It's not. It's the Democrats' racism to not arrest criminals based on the color of skin. It's the Democrats who are racist. And she fires back on the SCOTUS claims that they're ruling in favor of Donald Trump. Protect him. But she says, again, no, that these judges, they're vastly overreaching their authority, which is true, they are. Donald Trump is protected. He has exclusive authority by Article 2 in the Constitution. And all SCOTUS is really saying is Donald Trump has exclusive authority on Article 2 to be the executor of the federal government because you voted for him to do so. Now, some of you disagree with his decisions. Some of you didn't vote for Trump, but enough did that he is now the president. Just like when Joe Biden was the president, I guess, kind of. And Amy Coney Barrett, she said this: we're not deciding cases just for today. And we're not deciding cases based on the president as in the current occupant of the office. All true. As of all the Supreme Court justices on the conservative side, Amy Coney Barrett has probably gone with the left more than any others. But she goes on, we are deciding cases about the presidency, so we can taking each case and we're looking at the questions of presidential power as it comes in case that we decide today are going to matter 4 presidencies from now. Right, because after this election, Donald Trump's going to go and another president's going to come in. And that president is also going to have exclusive Article 2 authority over the federal government. He's going to run to be president, and he's going to tell the American people, or I guess he or she, you vote for me, I will do this. And then when they do that, what you voted for, these judges and these others, like the Democrats trying to do now, should not be able to stand in the way. That's all Amy Coney Barrett's saying. And she is 100% right here. Of course, these articles just go on this normal nonsense. The Supreme Court is backing Trump. Overwhelming evidence that the Supreme Court is on Donald Trump's team. A rare interviews, federal judges criticize Supreme Court's handling of the Trump cases. There's a disconnect. No, there's not. They're enforcing what our Constitution was supposed to mean. Donald Trump is on the top as the executive, and he has exclusive authority on that position as being the chief of the executive branch. Just like Congress has exclusive authority that no one else does. And then the judicial branch also has exclusive authority. what the Democrats try to make up randomly is like somehow the judicial branch is up here and the president and Congress is down here. And so everything Congress does and everything the president does has to get a yes or no from 600 plus judges. That's not how this works. That is not how our judicial system works. That is a judicial coup. And then you have American ambassador. She goes into LA. She goes on, the Supreme Court decision of morning an attack on every person in every country in this country. No, it's not. Enforcing our laws is not an attack, Karen. Arresting criminals is what the law is for. Deporting illegal aliens is what our laws say to do. And the left's trying to change and use all these words to call them like undocumented workers. Or one of the craziest ones I saw was undocumented American citizens. Whatever the heck that means. What kind of woke 2 + 2 5 world that is, I don't know. But they're illegal aliens. And the due process for remaining our country illegally is you get deported expeditiously. And she goes on again. I want the entire nation to hear me when I say this is an attack on people of LA. It is not an attack to enforce our laws. This is an attack on every person in our country. Again, no. It is enforcing our laws just like the American citizens voted for, and Donald Trump is more popular for doing so. Then Adam Schiff has to go away. Americans rounded up and arrested California residents. I wonder what context Adam Schiff left out there. Did you imagine? I mean, Adam Schiff. The administration rounded up and arrested California residents. What context would be left if he had said the whole sentence? I don't know, maybe they had broken the laws or they're impeding law enforcement, like throwing rocks at law enforcement vehicles. Then yes, they were rounded up and arrested properly, including U.S. citizens and legal residents. Yeah, if you break our laws, you get arrested. Thank you for pointing that out, Adam Schiff. And then he goes on to lie, based on the color of skin, which, of course, just what the left made up, because what they always try to do is to make everything about racism when they don't get their way. This is blatantly illegal. No, it's not. What's illegal is not enforcing our laws. The Supreme Court is allowing it to happen while the case proceeds because Donald Trump is doing his exclusive executive authority. And then I think one of the funniest posts I have ever seen is this from the weekend, and this is where Donald Trump had taken some time off over Labor Day. And the left, in their own mind, was like, oh my gosh, Trump is very sick, or Trump is going to be unalived. And then Political, as the most corporate fake news headline I think I've ever seen, Trump denies that he's dead. Fake news, fake news. You really outdid yourselves this time. Just when you think you can't hate these people enough, they come up with an article like that. Trump denies he's dead. Thank you, fake news. Donald Trump asks, why are the Democrats so against America? And that the very simple answer, I think the Democrats, they hate our country. I mean, the only thing that completely combines the Democrat Party together is their hatred. It's the only glue. A bunch of grievance groups come together in hatred and rage. So you see all the Karens and the weak, miserable men and angry women. That is the Democrat Party. And so since they're so full of rage and they're so full of hatred, they just have to lash out over and over and over again and try to collapse society. But on the other side, and as they see as the bonus, and what they're actually trying to go for is once society collapses, the Democrats, the ones that created the collapse, are then the ones who are going to run up and say, see, now we need to come and save you. Communist Revolution 101. And then we have more from here. So this is a U.S. District Judge. We're over. So let me finish this point. Biden appointed judge issues an injunction allowing transgender prisoners in Georgia to have surgery. So they're trying to force taxpayers to pay for people who are one sex to then try to change sexes. Not going to happen. Georgia has already had laws against it. This is, of course, going to get struck down. Absolute nonsense. But the rest of these are going to have to go in the stack for another day. I appreciate every single one of you. We're almost over to 6,000 people on X watching. It means a whole lot to you, to me, that you spend your evening here with the show. If you're enjoying this, please take a moment and share and like and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. We'll be on Monday through Wednesdays and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern on those days of the week. Also, if you'd like to support the shows further, you can do so over at Locals. For only $5 a month, you can support the show and help us stay on air and to fight the corporate media and help to share the stories that they refuse to share. With that, we'll be back on Wednesday, and thank everyone for you. We'll see you then. God bless the USA.